Greetings! I've wanted to work on the Venomcrawler from this start collecting chaos box into something more Slaanesh themed to fit in with my army for quite some time, but up until now, work commitments have been a bit of a barrier to that. With more time on my hands for the last month, I decided it was time to get onto this model. To begin with, I removed the body parts from the sprue and cleaned them of mould lines and tabs as per usual with my knife. I also took off the faceplate bit that goes around the mouth parts. My intention is to remove the mouth parts and have a demonic entity sprouting from there, and to do this I will need to remove this spiky crest bit from the top of the head area, as it will get in the way of anything that's coming out of that mouth section. I did this with my clippers before cleaning the area up with my knife in line with the armour trim around it. The next thing I did was to remove the tongue. Again, the clippers to take this off quite easily, but I had to use this for later on, so I put it to one side. With the tongue off, I could move on to the mouth parts themselves. Whilst it would be kind of cool to have a creature sprouting from the mouth itself, the angle and size of them would make it look more like it was trying to swallow something whole, and that's not really the look I was going for. With those bits removed, plastic glue can come in and we can glue both halves of this body together. Now at this stage it might be easier to add the back crest from the Venomcrawler kit, but I had misplaced the instructions, so I left it till later when it was a little more awkward. Not the end of the world, but it is something I would do differently. Now for the demons sprouting out of the body, I've chosen the Slaangors from the Age of Sigmar. They're already Slaanesh flavoured, very ornate, and the cow goat-like forms echo well with that of a Keeper of Secrets, I felt. So, taking the body for the squad leader from the sprue and giving it a clean up with my knife, it would just need a little cutting to fit onto the area on the Venomcrawler where the mouth was. But before I can do this, I would need to adjust the faceplate part from the Venomcrawler, using my clippers and knife to remove the lower mouthpiece of this part so that it would fit nicely around the waist area of the Slaangor body without that mouth there. Taking out my hobby saw, I worked out roughly the angle that the body would need to be at, before removing the lower third of the body and cleaning the area with my knife. At this stage, I would say to make double sure of the angle you are cutting it, as if you take off too much, it's going to need a lot more effort to cover up the join. After a quick test fit, I could bring in my plastic glue and stick the faceplate in place on the Venomcrawler before leaving it to set a little. Once enough time had passed that it's not just going to fall off when adding more parts, I could add some more glue and then push the Slaangor body into place, the faceplate covering up most of the join rather nicely and helping to tie the two parts in together. After giving this a little time to set, I could move on to tying the Slaangor body in a little more. First up, I removed with my clippers one of the first of the spikes on the underside of the model, as this one faces forwards a little and would get in the way of the next step. Taking this little loincloth from the Slaangor kit, I'm going to use this to help hide some of the front join on the model. However, a quick test fit showed that it would not sit well just gluing it on there. First, I needed to flatten the front of the model a little so it had a nice area for the glue to bond and wasn't at quite such a silly angle. This was a simple case of using my knife to trim off a little at a time until the piece sat nicely, before adding some glue and gluing on the front there. Next up, I moved on to the legs. With the Slaangor body being added, the angle at which the Venomcrawler sits would now be different, and as of such the legs would have to be positioned alternately to the way they were intended. To do this, they would need all the tabs on the join area snipped off so they could be positioned at will. Once this has been done with all 6, and the legs that come in 2 pieces will glue together as per the instructions in the manual, assuming they haven't been lost like mine, we can move on to the positioning of them on the body. To begin this process, I'm going to be positioning the smallest legs at the back of the model, but in order to get the angle I would want, it would mean removing the little grill area just behind the legs. This area is the right size for the leg sockets, and after flattening out both the grill area and a little bit of the top of the leg joint at an appropriate angle, these 2 smallest legs can be glued into place at the rear of the model. The second set of legs could now be added with a little adjustment needed. Just a bit of glue in the next socket along and put in place at an angle which will hold the model how you'd like it to stand. I found it helps to sit the model on a flat surface at the right angle and hold the legs in place one at a time till the glue has set well enough that they can stand alone. This bit took quite some time, and you could instead prop the body up by using things you have lying around, which would give you spare hands to put both legs on, and maybe go grab a drink while it sets. Once the first 4 legs are done, the last 2 are pretty easy. The model should hold its own weight now, so a bit of glue in the socket and they can be added in. Again, let these set for a while to avoid them falling out of position and needing to be removed and put back. Now the socket I use for these are the ones right at the front, which leaves a middle socket free, which we are going to fill later on. Now I chose to add the excruciator cannons exactly as they came on the model, as I didn't mind them pointing upwards a little. In hindsight, it does look a little bit silly this way, although I guess I could say they're pointing at something that's flying. If you did prefer them pointing forwards, I would suggest trimming off the pipes at the back and a little of the trim that runs around the edges of the hole they sit in. That way you could rotate them around until they were more level before adding the pipes back on to hide the join, and maybe a little green stuff to help even it out some more. You could even just remove the pipe and swap the guns around, having them shooting out the back instead. Either way, I added mine just as is before gluing the rear spiked crest in place on the back of the model. Having done that, I began to construct more of the Slaangor body, taking the shoulder pad from the kit, cleaning it up and then gluing both halves of it into place before moving on to the head. Taking the head for the body from the Slaangor kit and the tongue removed from the Venomcrawler earlier, I figured this guy would look cool with a nice long forked tongue. With my knife, I cut the tongue down a little, taking it about 1/3 of its length off, as the base part was quite a bit thicker than the Slaangor mouth. With this done, I could take the knife and very carefully remove the tip of the tongue from the head to give the new tongue a nice place to join to. With this cut to size, some glue can be added to join the tongues together before attaching the head to the horn part from the Slaangor kit. Now, before the head can go onto the neck, however, it will need a little adjustment with the clippers to change the angle of the head so it's not looking directly downwards. Once this has been snipped off and the angle is good, the head and the body can then be glued together. Now, at this point I found that the arms, which I had intended to use, were not quite fit in their original position due to the positioning of the front legs. To fix this, they can just be glued at a slightly different angle on the arm. However, it would leave a little bit sticking out of the elbow area. Sadly, I don't have footage of the test fitting due to my battery running out, but the sticky out bit can be removed with clippers before using my knife to round out the area a little so it better resembled an arm. That adjustment made, one of the claws from the Slaangor kit was added into place and held for a few seconds until it was solid enough to move. If the join looks a bit funky here, it is fairly small and you can use some green stuff just to cover that up. The other arm was a lot more straightforward. I chose a sword arm for this one as I thought it looked cool and wanted to use the spare claw for something else on another day. With the arms added, at the front of the model I noticed there are 2 holes where the metal tentacles would have originally gone. I felt that the tentacles would be better off elsewhere, however, so I've taken 2 claw arms from the Demonette's kit. An extra set of pincers seems very Slaanesh inclined, so a little glue and these could be added to fill in those holes. Again, if you didn't want to add these, at this stage you could just fill the holes with some green stuff. And speaking of those tentacles, I plan on putting them in the holes left where the legs would normally have gone. To do this, I carefully trimmed off the little tab on the end, before adding a decent amount of glue and positioning them in the holes, flailing upwards and outwards a little between the front and middle sets of legs on either side of the Venomcrawler. At this point there is just 2 things that need to be done before I feel this is ready for painting. The first is to glue the exhaust pipes into place, and the second is to add some green stuff around a few of the joins to hide the gaps. Taking equal amounts of blue and yellow, these can be mixed together before rolling out a couple of small sausage shapes which I'm going to use to fill in the gaps where the Slaangor body joins the Venomcrawler. Again, hindsight is a marvellous thing, and if I were to do this again I would have done this bit before adding the legs, as it would have been exponentially easier. Still, taking my damp sculpting tool to avoid it sticking, I poked, prodded and smoothed the green stuff into place to fill those gaps up. Sadly, at this point, I once again had become quite engrossed in the procedure and totally forgotten that the camera existed, hence barely any of this process actually being visible. Hopefully you can get the general gist of it though. Once this has been done and left overnight, the whole thing can be based and painted, in my case resulting in this, my take on a Slaanesh themed Venomcrawler. With 3 Slaangor in the box, I could see myself maybe making up another 1 or 2 of these, as I think they would look fantastic in my Chaos Soup army. Whether or not they're any good in game I have yet to see, but I can at least hope. And at that, I shall say thank you to all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this Kitbash. I certainly enjoyed making it, as it was an idea I've had in my head and been looking forward to for quite some time. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel. I have many more ideas on the way, and with a lot of extra time on my hands recently, I was able to edit this and the previous video quite quickly. Maybe I can get to 1 a week, who knows? We shall have to see. So stay safe, and have a good one all.